Okay, let me see if I can do this because we've been away for a couple weeks and we've started feeding ourselves back into other narratives, and suddenly I've lost track of the one we were in. But this is interesting because what's been happening in the last 2 weeks, okay, my head's just all full of it and everything. One, I was, as you all know, if you follow the newsletter, at the Touchstone conference this past weekend, which was incredibly interesting because, of course, the other podcasters and writers and I'd say influencers, but that's harder to say, right? Other planetary mode speakers. We're talking about what it means to belong in a shared narrative, and I realized that was a theme when we were at BaseCon a few weeks ago too, and it's starting to emerge. I'm good at this, you know. It's starting to emerge as a thing that I realized that everybody's talking about, except for what they're mainly talking about is we don't have one, right? It's like I had this feeling even when I was at Touchstone because the speakers, who all happened to be men, accidentally, interestingly, it was a very masculine moment, right? And they're all doing like bro stuff. Men have real friendships, and they're talking about all their friends, and they're saying, well, you know, I was at this conference and I was at that conference and I saw so and so and so and so was writing me, and there is a kind of shared narrative there, but there's mixtures of narratives. So we have the group that we were with at BasedCon, and we have the group at Touchstone, and then I have my students and my classes on campus, but there are two different classes this quarter. So there's History of European Civilization and there's Studying Medieval History. There's, you know, then all of the other networks that we're in. I'm, you know, back at fencing practice because I need to, like, you know, get my game going good. And I'm in my Dragon Common room. And we did some podcasts last week with both Mark at Navigating Patterns and Dominic on Legend Haven. And suddenly you realize, I'm dropping my notes. I'll lose my place in my own narrative. Suddenly you realize how many different conversations you're in, and only some of them overlap. And this is obviously what happened to us over the last 10, 15 years in social media, which drove everybody crazy. That we had been used to being in separate, non-contiguous narratives, and then suddenly they all slammed into each other, and then we suddenly realized that we don't actually know which one we belong to. And there is this huge longing for some sense of reality, which is in fact saying, which story are we in? I mean, just whose narrative is this anyway? Well, at Touchstone, the baseline narrative was, of course, the gospel. But a number of the speakers, in fact, all of the speakers, I mean, the theme of the conference they set up was great and wonderful days, taking a saying from John Henry Newman that we are in great and wonderful days, even though we're in this period in which the church feels like it's shrinking in terms of membership. But you could say it's shrinking in terms of the people that identify themselves through this particular narrative. That most of the speakers were then given that overarching theme to think about, well, how do we find ourselves in the boat? The image that they had in the advertisements for the conference, the poster and things was, you know, Christ in the boat asleep, and the apostles are terrified because the waves are coming up, and it's like, how do you find yourself in this shared narrative in the boat? And most of the speakers, they included people like Paul Kingsnorth, whom you've all probably heard of, or Jonathan Pajot. So I know many of you have definitely heard of. A lot of people there for Jonathan. Richard Rowland, who does podcasts with Jonathan. Chris Wiley, whose podcast I've been on when he talks with his pugcast about theology. I'm gonna. Robert Vance, who was great on Milton, right? And if I start naming all of them, they'll be sad if I didn't manage to name them all off the top of my head, because we were all in this shared narrative. Rod Dreher, trying to figure out Matthew Crawford. See, maybe I can get them all in. Hans Boersma, Larry Norman, I think is right. Have I missed somebody out who was in that wonderful conversation, all trying to figure out how do we get people back in the boat? How do we get people to understand that we are actually in this one great story? Casey and I, in our podcast with Dominic, we're talking about how every story is in fact the Christian story, because that's the only true one. It's if you and any true story, I mean, it's like that it's not even that's the only true one. That's the only one there is, because the reality of the creation, the incarnation, our journey in time is, of course, being in the boat with Christ, whether it's in the waves or whether you've fallen out of the boat. The boat's still the story. Um, that Casey and I talked about that with Dominic. You see how hard this is, right? If you are in the boat of narrative and you've got all these waves of all these, like, social media, and I follow this podcaster and I follow that podcaster and I only know some of what he's talking about, and I barely look at this conversation, but oh, don't you know that one? And before you know it is kind of where my students are in thinking about, like, they come to History of European Civilization, they want me to tell them the story of the history of European civilization. I'm like, I can't, because there are too many versions of which one we're in, right? Okay, back to the Touchstone Conference. That one of the things that, for example, Rod Dreher talked about is wanting to be in the narrative of the place, making sacred places again. And he was thinking specifically, because he lives in Hungary right now, about Europe as a place. Well, I'm trying to talk with my students in History of European Civilization about that. And it's like, well, is Europe a place? How do we talk about it as a place? It's multiple places. It's, if you have an Anglophone memory of things, it may come from England, but if you're German or, of German heritage, maybe you do or don't belong to that Anglophone narrative, since the English and the Americans seem to have made enemies of the Germans several times in the last 100 years. What about the Spanish, whom the English made enemies of back in 1588 and have continued to make enemies of? Or what about the French, whom I think they just count as frenemies, because they, the English and the French don't know who they are unless they're fighting each other. So Dreher was wanting to say, well, place, and talking about Chartres, wanting to be in Chartres and wanting to be in that story, which me sitting in the back row with the ladies was hearing, saying, why doesn't he talk about why the cathedral is there at all, which is Our Lady? So the story that you think you're in, depending on which characters you highlight, which context you highlight, which timeline you highlight, oh, no wonder it's like we're here. We are in the ark. Here's our narrative. We're in the ark, sailing on the ocean of all of these different waves that are crashing against our boat constantly. Crash, 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 crash. Hoping that we can somehow get everybody back in the boat and see Christ as our captain. And then people despair, right? It's like, how do you ever get people to see this narrative when they haven't grown up with it, when they've lost it, when there's no way of, well, inventing it? Like, can you make people feel that they belong to a narrative if they don't grow up with their parents telling them the stories? This seems to be one of the major themes for us cradle Christians. If I've never even wondered about whether or not this story is true, I mean, I have wondered about it a lot, whether it's true, but if I've never had a time in which I wasn't thinking about this story, how do I even come to it? Is it possible? Can we bring people into this story when they grown up with others, that they come from other parts of the world? They're not from Europe, they're from China, or they're from Africa, or they're from India. These things start pressing on people's imagination greatly. I lost my place. Where was I going? Oh, yes, with the narrative of, oh, right, the irony. In that, in all of these contexts, which I've been talking about, teaching history of European civilization, studying medieval history, being at Touchstone, and everybody there is Christian and wants everybody else to be Christian. The call is constantly, oh, people don't know enough history anymore. They used to know it. We used to know who we were. We need to go back to Europe. We need to, recover the European tradition. We need to be part of this thing that we've lost. And we're all in this nostalgic crisis of wanting to be in a time when absolutely everybody already knew that they were part of this story. The irony being, of course, that if you're a medievalist and you start back far enough, you remember the time when Europe wasn't part of the story, when it was pagan, when it was not, in fact, not Roman, when, the Germanic peoples didn't even have writing, so we don't know what their stories are, except they only write them down after they become Christian. The irony, and I've become insufferable, I think, to all contexts, because I keep pointing this out and everybody gets mad at me. The narrative that we want everyone to be in for Europeans was never indigenous. This is not the indigenous narrative. This is a narrative that grown-ups were catechized into and made to see themselves a part of, which is topical for where I start in my History of European Civilization class, because we start with Augustine's On the Catechizing of the Uninstructed, De Catechizandis Rudibus, taking the problem, and not even in Europe, right? It's in North Africa, because he's in Carthage, because at that point, the Romans have conquered the Carthaginians, destroyed their story, told, of baby sacrifice and things like that. But, the Phoenicians who settled Carthage are then conquered by the Romans. So by the time Augustine is living there, they've been under occupation for several hundred years by the Romans. And now the emperor has said, no, 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 you can't have that old Phoenician story, nor can you have that old Roman story. You're going to have this Christian story that you now have to see yourselves in and be a part of. And it was lovely when I realized that this was what I was in fact trying to teach my students in the History of European Civilization, not all of whom grew up with these stories, some of whom would claim to be indigenously part of this story. But guess what? If you don't know it, are you a part of it? Where does it, how do you become part of it? Fundamentally, how do you convert? Then, how many layers down am I in so far? Almost to the point where I bring Casey in. I have to set her up, right? It's like, where are we going this time? One of the things I kept hearing at the Touchstone Conference, and particularly in arguments about philosophy, and that we in Christianity should know things like the final form of things, that we should understand that things are made to a particular purpose, and that we worry about the term monotheism. It always bothers me because it's a 17th century term, but that you have a particular image of God, that you have a particular image of the cosmos, and that this is what we in fact want to recover and participate in. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, listening to these philosophers talk philosophy, I'm not sure that that's in the Gospels. And then, of course, I'm recognizing Augustine, being one of those philosophers, is arguing in his terms on the basis of his previous Neoplatonism. And then I start getting anxious and worried and thoughtful about, wait a minute, exactly what story were the pagan Romans converting from? And how much of what we think is our story is actually still part of theirs? Well, if you read enough Chesterton, you already know the answer, because, of course, as Chesterton pointed out, the only thing that in modernity actually knows anything about paganism is Christianity, because it came straight up against it and beat it as a story. And yet, we take on the shape of our opponents and the questions that they raise as we are trying to answer them. Which gets us finally back to the shared narrative we've been working on here in the Mosaic Ark of the discarded image and where it came from, and our reading of Cicero's Dream of Scipio. And we left off at the point where we were about to meet God. Welcome to the Mosaic Ark. Okay, you got all that?
Yeah. Yes, the whirlwind is swirling in my head, and I can't help but wonder if since Roman times, since you brought it up, we've done a 180 and we're back where we started, and in which everyone says, "Well, I wanna pick and choose from all of these different, pagan religions."
I
We seem to be doing that now.
There yes, I hadn't thought of that. Well spotted. That we are very much in the situation that Augustine was having to instruct Deo Gratias on the catechizing in that because one of the things he tells Deo Gratias is you have to know who you're talking to. And they're going to come from all these different I mean somewhat Deo Gratias Augustine points to different educational backgrounds. So they're guys that are studied in the liberal arts or they're grammarians and rhetoricians, so they have different training. But the
Mhm.
reality is what you just said. They're also coming from all of those different mystery cults and city cults and, the layers of tradition that the Romans overrode by first instituting the imperial cult as the state religion and then replacing the imperial cult with Christianity as the one that you
Well,
have.
before it replaced it with Christianity, though, it just kind of tried to absorb all the other cults. It had its official cult,
Mhm.
right? Its
Mhm.
official religion, but everybody else could do what they wanted and worship who they wanted, and it wasn't a problem until the Christians. They were troublesome, those Christians, because they just wouldn't be rational. It's like, just what's 3 grains of incense? What's your problem? You know?
Right.
They didn't understand that the Christians weren't just living, they weren't just LARPing. They actually believed God was real, and they couldn't disobey him. And I think a lot of the Romans, they were probably doing a bit of what was fashionable, which is also what's going on right now because pagan Vikings is a very fashionable thing right now.
Mhm.
Might have something to do with the television show, but it's real. It's real. There are people out there making YouTube videos and talking about, their pagan ancestors and trying to live like their pagan ancestors, and they call themselves pagans. And not quite sure they know what it means, other than they just want in touch with their ethnic roots and they don't want to be Christian because it's hard. Um,
Yes, well, I mean, I love the meme on that. It's like the last thing your pagan ancestors did was convert.
yeah,
If you
right.
if you wanna be like your pagan ancestors, guess what? That of itself doesn't solve the question.
Yeah.
Um,
Details. Don't
details,
bother me with
details.
details.
Well, so the thing is, I mean, this is what's what's interesting about I've been using the Augustine on catechizing as my opening move in history of European civilization for some time now because it's such a great introduction to saying the tradition that we're in is one that claims there is a narrative, which Augustine tries to by saying, here you start. How do you catechize? You have to have a narratio or narration that starts from creation. Describes the fall, goes through the 6 ages, gets to we're in the sixth age. This story that comes out of, I mean, we say the scriptures, right? But what it comes out of this totally different tradition. You're talking about Abraham and Israel and the Babylonian captivity and I mean,
Mhm.
even the gospel, right? It's all coming out of a story other than the one that the people had locally.
Yeah.
And yet somehow they convince the other thing I did when I had the slides from 2 years ago when I taught the class, and my opening slides at that point were the image of the gospel book that they had in the coronation of King Charles III, and saying,
All
"Oh,
right.
this is the one that the other Augustine, brought from Rome to
Yeah.
Kent, and
Very cool.
they converted, and that's therefore carrying this book into this coronation is saying we belong to this other story. Like here's
Yeah.
the book, we belong to this other
Yeah.
story."
I don't think people understand how huge that was. I
Indeed.
mean, King Charles gets a lot of crap for being an environmentalist and for flirting with Islam, but he brought that book into his coronation, and I can't help but wonder if it wasn't, if it was something beyond just tradition. I know he's the head of the Church of England, but that's a pretty amazingly big symbol that he used during the coronation.
Well, it's a great symbol for what we're talking
Yeah.
about, right? Because here we're carrying this book, right? And the book it only has two picture pages left in it. One, which is therefore they had it open to one of them. The one they had open in the procession was Luke, like it's the author page for Luke, and
Mhm.
then there's another page that's a series of images of the Passion, like Passion Week. It's entry into Jerusalem and then other events, and it's lit like it's delightful because it looks like little squares. It's like a comic page or something, right? These have the
Cool.
different little images in it. Um, but you're effectively carrying this storybook. It's like, what if you walked in with, Snow White, right?
Yeah.
Which was one of the this is one of the things that Jonathan Pajot, of course, talked about at the conference, right? It's like we want to be in these fairy stories, which we've
Mhm.
talked about how, the Grimm version that we have was it sounds biblical because Grimm made it so, right? He rewrote it so that it has the same sort of uh, rhetoric
Mhm.
as the scripture translations in Germany at the time.
I
So
hadn't we I don't think we had talked about that. That's really interesting.
um well, I think I have in my head that I said it
I'm
out
sure
loud, but
I'm sure
possibly
you
I
have
didn't.
said it.
Right? No, this is our theme, our theme of the shared narrative problem. It's like what's in my head and what have I said out loud and
Yeah, we
what does everybody
yeah,
remember?
we've definitely spoken about fairy tales before, but I don't remember that point. That's a real interesting point that he wrote it specifically in a scriptural style.
Right, because that's what everybody was reading in the early 19th century in Germany, and particularly in Protestant regions. And so, if you
Mhm.
want something to sound venerable, it needs to sound like the scripture. Like now people want to write in the King James Bible diction, or which True
Right.
Grit did beautifully, right? It's like if you learn to speak from reading this book, you're going to sound, particular
Yes.
rhetorical style. That what if you're carrying a fairy tale into that coronation, which kind of, according to Tolkien, they were, right? You're carrying the gospel, which is the great fairy tale, which is saying this is the one that we're in now. This is the
Mhm.
real one. This is we thanks to the revelation through Christ, and the story and the incarnation, and our immersion of ourselves in that story. We belong in that now. But as Augustine's lesson to Deo Gratias points out, they had to teach people the story. They didn't have it before. That was the whole point of catechizing, that you tell them this story and then show them how they're actually in it.
Mhm.
So
Right, there is only one story,
well, we
and
believe that, right? It's
well,
a
I mean, you can even see it too. And comparative religions over the 20th century like to point out the um, the similarities between pagan religions and Christianity, like the flood story, for instance. And I mean, I'm just saying, everybody around the world does have a version of this story. And the question that people were posing, this was probably the historic Jesus movement, was who's got the right one, right? But they were all very similar. So when Augustine was teaching this as a story, it must have been somewhat familiar to him, especially because they were a Phoenician ethnic culture.
okay, so you've what you've done is folded the proof into the premise.
I don't did not know I did that. So I apologize. Or
No. Well,
okay, I
so no, the
know.
problem is, so the premise is there is a true story, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
What you did was make the move of how you prove that it's true.
Well, I was saying this is how other people were saying that it wasn't true, but you're
Right.
saying this is how you prove it is true.
No, I'm saying that what you just described is the proof, as opposed to the premise is there's a true story.
Oh yeah, well,
Right. And
yes,
then
to me,
how
yeah,
right.
there is one story, and the evidence of it for it is that people have similar stories in different religions and cultures.
Right, but do you see the difference between my saying the premise is there's one true story, and what you're describing is the one a version of how to prove it, because there's other similar stories, and therefore because they're similar stories, they the
Maybe in the back of my head.
okay,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
need
So
you to
seriously,
understand this. I know
I
I
have these thoughts that just float in and out. But
no, because you're usually coming to these things with the right questions, right? And the problem with what you just said is that people get in fights over it about
mhm.
how do you and this is we I think I riffed off of this last time, how people are trying to prove that C.S. Lewis is pagan or cultish,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because he did what you just said, because he was very excited with this idea of it seems true to him because he can see all of these other stories having similar
Oh, okay.
structures, right? But that's the
Yeah.
proof, not the
Mhm.
premise is there's one true story. The you have to then make an argument for that claim. So you premise
Mhm.
something, just declare it, right? How then do you prove it? And the proof doesn't work unless you accept certain other things. So
So,
saying there's a lot of other stories that have the similar structure isn't actually the proof that you want it to be. If people are not going to say, like, if you started with the Christ is the true story, and then look, all these other stories reflect it. Oh, great! It's like confirmation bias.
oh, okay. Yeah. That's not really what I was going for.
No, I
I
know.
was okay. I was just saying that, there really is one story, and people have little snippets of it here and there that are they're incredibly similar, and you can't help but notice it.
Once you accept that there is one story, right?
Okay.
You start noticing it once you've accepted that. But I mean, this is the sort of challenge of okay, maybe we can test this with evolution because we've been reading about that, right? But
Mhm.
this is the challenge of conversion, right? It's that if I can show you this story that strikes you as true, then you will start seeing echoes of it elsewhere. And since St. Paul
Ah.
did this when he was trying to talk to the Athenians, saying, "Oh, look, I can prove that you actually already know what I'm talking about." Everyone thinks that that's the starting point, but that only works if you've actually already gotten some common ground with them. Back to our shared
Mm.
narrative problem, right? It's like, how do you establish a common ground on the basis of which you can make the proof? And we talked a few weeks ago about the way in which Newton played fancy, bait and switch on absolute
Right.
space about that right here.
Mhm.
Absolute space is like the common ground that you simply declare exists, and then you build all this stuff on top of it. If you haven't actually properly established common ground, you can't make anybody accept anything else that you're arguing. Now, the common ground that Augustine suggests for Deo Gratias is longing for something more permanent.
Mhm.
And he has this sort of premise in there that point to them that they're dissatisfied with the kinds of, I mean, it's a very interesting sort of modern moment, right? They're dissatisfied with kinds of entertainment and frenzy and city life that Carthage is a like hopping place, right? And they have theaters
Mhm.
and they have Colosseum, they have not Colosseum, they have amphitheater for the games, and they have shopping, and they have social life and such like that. And what Augustine suggested Deo Gratias to help them see why they want the story is, see how unhappy you are,
Yeah.
right?
Right. That's the wrong track, and here's the evidence. How do you feel?
How do you feel, right? So I mean, the
Yeah.
the one the one thing that we know Augustine was great at was rhetoric, right?
Mhm.
And so he's trying to find that starting place to get you to see that you want this thing that I have. So pain, right? He points he finds the pain and then suggests the solution, which is this new narrative that I'm going to give you, which will show you that there's a better story to participate in. But
Mhm.
that was not the place I was meaning to go. Um, but do you understand now why I say if you've already accepted the claim that this is the story, you're going to start, of course, you're going to start finding other ways in which it's true because you want now for it to be true, but you've already actually
Yeah.
accepted that it's true.
No, I could see that. Yeah. Else, what starting ground would you have to look for anything?
Right, right. So our problem is, I mean, it's very like Augustine's problem is how do you get them to take that first step, which is basically, and then once they've done that, they've converted. because now they're willing to have you tell them the full story and give them more pieces of it. And ooh, that's cool. And look how it connects to everything else. But you had there's that initial step of how do I find that common ground with you that I can show you that this story is already the one you think you have, which is kind of a great trick. Right.
A rhetorical trick?
Well, yes. I mean, the first thing in rhetoric is capture the goodwill of your audience, right? So you get them on your side to then want the thing that you're trying to show. It's total salesmanship. Okay. Well, let me see if our chat's on our side right now. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to keep trying these opening monologues. They seem to warm people up nicely. Daydreamer saying, crown is mine, all mine. And suggesting, wait, so you're saying the solution to the European nightmare is to provoke a war between England and France? Of course. How could I miss it? I don't know if that's what's going on.
They finally signed an armistice and over ownership of Normandy in 1992, I think.
And it went downhill from there. Clearly, what we need is war with France and England, and that keeps them distracted from everything else.
Maybe King William invades France in the future.
It would be in the tradition of his family.
Interesting,
right?
Wouldn't
so
it?
we have one of our shared narratives in Draco Alchemicus land, i.e. the three of us writing the poem right now, which is think about how it's like we because of our shared narrative of our dragon story and alchemy and stuff, like we have this whole like secret language now of the things that are happening in Act 4. And guys, you're gonna have to wait till we get it illustrated to find out what we're talking about. So sorry.
Can't rush perfection.
No. Part of it is, of course, what the Normans did and how they brought, the piracy in, and it sticks around for centuries, and that's the story that we're in now. But
it's still here. Yeah.
That our problem is to get you to see that our Draco Alchemicus version of everything as, in fact, the narrative we're actually already in. So, to talk about this great trick, right? It's like the guys at Touchstone wanted everybody to get in the story that they were telling. Here's the boat. We want everybody in our boat. Competing boats, no, it's the same boat. How do you get them to want to be in the boat? Is the fight the pirate? No, okay. Anyway, I'm distracted. I'm having a terrible time keeping shared narratives this week because I'm in so many different conversations. John Abrisi is saying, maybe. Bernard Larnagan. I know, John, you desperately want me to get in the Bernard Larnagan narrative. And I will tell you that, unfortunately for me, or fortunately, I found out that Bernie McGinn, one of my previous senior colleagues, he's emeritus now, was taught by Larnagan. So I'm already there. It's like finding out that I'm thanks to Professor Kelber in undergraduate, I was already in the Marshall McLuhan story via Walter Ong, but I didn't know it. So we've actually already been talking about it all along. The process is called differentiation of consciousness. A catechetics built on that idea would revolutionize things, except for you'd still have to be able to explain it in terms that everybody else can hear. And that's always been our problem, right? We'll have you back on. Don't worry. Actually, John has some stories of Dreamtime in Australia that we promise we want to have you on.
Well, that's perfect, because I was just thinking that's why you do it through fiction, so people can understand it. And that is what I was talking to Dominic about.
Go on.
Yeah. Well, you can only, because people don't have the exact same shared narrative, or if any at all, you can only explain things to them in fiction, maybe using things, mythical things like dragons, something that they might understand as something bad and scary. Why is it bad and scary? Okay, well, let me tell you, right? And then you can tell them a story, and then you can bring them you can catechize people like that. Not that we're out to catechize.
Oh, yes, we are. Literally, we're just
on purpose.
No, instruct. That's all it means.
Yeah. Well, that's true. Actually, what I said to him on last week was, yes, I would definitely wanted to open people's eyes and let them see things that they should be seeing, and they just weren't.
Right. Okay,
which you can
she
only do through
does it.
fiction sometimes.
Casey does this to me constantly. We'll be having this argument. I'm trying to.
Switch topics.
No,
Sorry.
no, 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 no. That it'll be this like like okay, it's the premise is not the proof, and I'm trying. And then Casey just leaps over that into this utterly brilliant insight of that's why we need the fiction. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's right. Because no, this is okay. This you've just given us yet again the higher level reason why we need Draco Chemicus. We need to write it to make a story that we can then use to point people to things. And
Yes.
it's a giant parable, which is what our Lord Jesus Christ used to talk to things. But it's when you were saying that, it's saying history wants to be this, because if we can all participate in this big shared narrative of history, then we understand things, right? And my big goal as a historian and as a teacher is always get enough people in this boat of the history, right? If I can get a bigger boat, I need an ark-sized boat to get them all into all of the knowledge, all of the scientia, all of the history that I have, and then you can start making all these connections and it will all make sense. But we don't I mean, we're mortal, right? And people don't have lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes. You need to get them up to speed quickly, and that's what Jesus did with the stories.
Mm-hmm.
It's and you can only get people into the shared narrative that way. And then there's the meta question that you just now raised of like, which stories do that? Which ones? And dragons, like we know we are like deeply committed in the Dragon Common Room to a dragon in the story will somehow get people there quicker. What is it?
Was it about a dragon?
Yeah. You need
Well,
the
they're pretty
dragons. We know we
spectacular.
need the dragons. The thing is, the dragons, we've said fantasy, right? But the dragons work at all of these different levels. And Tolkien was convinced that you need the dragon in the story too. And then it's like fill in the blank. What is it that it like turbocharges the exercise of getting them in the shared narrative?
It's like it reminds people of something they didn't even know they'd forgotten, which was this
Yeah.
kind of primal fear of losing something, not just their life, but, maybe a hoard of gold, right? Something it took away from them a long time ago. It may bring them closer to wanting to fight it, or it may just terrify them and make them run away because they remember that a dragon is the reason they lost their home. And, Tolkien did this in The Hobbit by, the dragon Smaug, like destroying a village. But it's really about losing Eden.
She does this constantly to me when we're writing, right? I was like, that's it. Yes. Beautiful. That's really, really good. This is something about, it's even better than Augustine. Good job. Better than Augustine.
I didn't say that, God. Okay.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. No, it's at the level that we've been working. It's like you need to somehow get them in the story. And he started with, this frustration that he has, but it's a very sophisticated frustration that he's giving them. This is giving them at the sort of, 4 or 5-year-old level, right? Of that fear of loss.
Mm-hmm.
And at that I mean, what we've been talking about with Beowulf, which we should definitely talk about. I'm gonna be talking with my classes about Beowulf, but what I talked about at BaseCon with the sense of the monsters is your whole home is gone.
Yes, that's it right there. And that is probably where I got the idea from listening to your talk there. It was really good. Yeah.
But it's that loss that you're describing. It's so powerful. And that what we want back is we're in this terrifying storm and you're about to drown and we want to be saved.
Yeah, and in Beowulf, perfect example. It's like it wasn't just his home that was destroyed; it was everyone he loved. His whole family was gone, and that's what motivated him to kill the monster.
Well, this is definitely what we're trying to do in Draco Chemicus, which is terrify people enough and terrify ourselves enough to recognize what salvation is. It's being rescued from this horror that we're in and that we don't even see, which is always when you're trying to do the shared narrative of saying, why would you need Christ? Why would you want to be in the boat with him? And, the people are saying, well, you see all the sort of horror that's outside in society, but the real horror is always in here. It's inside. because otherwise you're just looking for comfort and rescuing from the miseries of the present life.
Yeah.
John saying this is back half an hour ago, but I'll read the comments now. The human mind is ever the same, but the techniques it employs develop over time. The first differentiation of consciousness arises when the infant learns to speak. They move from immediacy to meaning. Okay, now you're getting into like cognitive development and the levels of communication that we're working on, which I think actually we've already been doing all along, because that's why we wrote a children's story for kids, right? With the animals. Daydreamer saying Casey got a nap in for this intro. No, she didn't. She was listening better than you are, clearly. Ha. Okay.
I do not nap when the professor speaks. She's too interesting. Sorry, guys.
Well, and she's proving that she listens. So there you go. Okay, so John is now having a conversation with himself about systematics, and we are now on a different plane, right? Which is this problem of, like when we're talking theology, what I heard at the Touchstone conference, and which I appreciated because the guys were talking and I was listening, and I'm do these things differently than they do. They love systematic theology. And there were some excellent sort of meditations on things about particularly Boersma on miracle and the problem of being in the boat or being out of the boat, and what's miracle, and answering Hume, whom we're thinking about in Act 4 because of the science. And yet we're the baseline problem of instruction is constantly, how do you help this setup, right? This is what Augustine says about the incarnation, that if we have all this understanding that flashes around in our heads. I mean, Augustine has this great image of the ictus intelligentiae, the flash of understanding that when it comes out of your mouth is always like awkward and clunky. This thing I understood, I can't express. And then the other, the other weariness is that you have in instruction is saying, I've explained this so many times and you guys still don't get it. And Augustine says to Deo Gratias, his deacon, well, if you feel that way, think how God feels. If you think you're frustrated at how hard it is to get people to understand what you're talking about, guess what God did, right? He's like trying desperately to talk to us through the prophets, and we're not listening. Okay, I'll come.
Yes.
Empty himself, enter into our story, become part of our story, and you still don't get it.
What you're saying is God at some point said, don't make me come down there, and then he did?
Sort of, right? And he comes down, and then and this is where John is fair, right? There's so many layers of how many ways can we misunderstand this. It's honestly, I think, why the great theologians eventually sort of like Thomas Aquinas throw up their hands and say, all this effort that I'm going into like unpacking it and describing it precisely is nothing against prayer, or just being in liturgy and adoration at the Mass or something.
Mm-hmm.
Even Tolkien says it after he writes books and books and books of notes trying to get his story right, that all of it's in the Mass. All of this story is there in, and then you're thinking, okay, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? It's like somehow the Mass is that entry of God into our story, and we're constantly trying to see the fullness of that entry, but it happens in time, and so of course it's happening in history, and we're trying to show you that story that we're in. Okay, John saying the other functional specialties, history, science, art, establish the truth of the revealed story. As Newman said, there can be no conflict between science and revealed truth. This is what I was pushing Casey on. I think the truth is something that flashes on you. I don't think the proof is going to work unless this is Augustine said, this is what Anselm said, faith seeking understanding. The faith comes, it flashes on you, and then you get like super interested in understanding all of its complexities. or
You're
its
capable of understanding
simplicity,
it.
and then you become capable of understanding all of its, simplicity and complexity, and you just love thinking about it because there's so many layers of it. It's like this great diamond that you love turning over and over and over, or a kaleidoscope, or all the metaphors come in to play.
Mhm.
But you know that there's a binary, but sort of before and after. I didn't have faith, I do have faith, because as soon as you do, you can't think of how you didn't, because it just seems so true, right? And so I think the truth can't be proved, which is why we're always struggling with it. It's there, and it can be apprehended by our minds, but once you've done that, you are already inside it.
Inside what?
The truth, which is the story, which you've recognized, right? The conversion, this is the sort of, and
Sorry, it was a flash and now it's gone. Sorry. Just
it's
kidding.
good one. You're getting it.
Okay.
She's so good. So good. Daydreamer says it's a great intro. Of course it was. I was riffing. This is like intellectual jazz, and or whatever. Anyway, remembering that what we planned to talk about this again was the Dream of Scipio, and I think it's a good test case for this problem that we're saying. How much of this was okay, so how much of it is simply true because it's available to our human understanding? That this is the same kind of argument, the very Augustinian argument that, for example, Bartolome de las Casas made about the degree to which the Native Americans could already have the truth without revelation. And of course, his big argument, his like flashy argument, is they get as far as they can with reason, and with reason you get to human sacrifice. Woohoo! Right?
Mhm.
Because if you're going to like sacrifice to the gods, and you really believe in, the divine and creation and everything, and you're going to sacrifice the most precious thing you have, of course you're going to sacrifice people.
Yes. Right. Not just people, but children.
I very much,
Right.
yeah. And
Yeah.
which the Carthaginians were doing, apparently,
Oh,
right? But
and I just had a thought about that. Now the Carthaginians were they were
yes,
from Egypt, and that
yes,
area of the world they did sacrifice. Yeah. So that the Romans knew this,
they
that they
do, and
brought
that's
it
why
to
the
North
Dream of
Africa
Scipio
with
is
them
actually
wouldn't be
relevant to all
really
of this, because
surprising.
it's this Scipio that's about to destroy Carthage.
Right.
Right. So, this I always have unauthorized people. I always have a problem with one that Vox can't say Carthage the way anybody else on the planet says it. Carthage.
How does he say it?
He says
Oh, God,
Carthage,
yeah.
which
No, he
all
does have
that
a
says to me is,
accent.
it's like, and he rightly pointed this out, right? If you can't say the word like anybody's ever saying it, it means you only learned it from a book, right? So you've read it in a book and you're saying it. I missaid Bilbo for ages because I said it out loud to myself as Biblo or something. I don't know what I was
Oh,
thinking. And so getting the Hobbit's name right, it's Bilbo. That if you're saying it because you're saying it wrong, that's actually not embarrassing, because what it means is you read, right? You learned it from reading, which, okay,
mm.
that's fine. But the Romans are not, famously ethical necessarily.
No, but I don't think they had human sacrifice, and neither did the Greeks. And I mean purposeful human
Would you like to
sacrifice, not
revisit that
executions.
thought?
Not executions. I mean, like, if I kill this person here, I'll have a great harvest. No, they killed because they were subjugating people, and it was scary, and nobody would disobey them after that.
I'm so sorry. The Greeks definitely had human sacrifice because it's in Iphigenia.
Really?
Yeah, it's the play, and it's before, when they're about to sail to Troy. This is in the story, right? When they're about to sail to Troy, they can't get the right winds, and
Mm-hmm.
so Agamemnon is going to have to make a sacrifice, and he sacrifices his daughter.
Sorry, I don't remember the story. I'm sorry.
Iphigenia at Alice is the play, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
And no, the Greeks definitely did human sacrifice.
Well, it was a play, but I mean, they put it in the play. I mean, they didn't practice incest either, but it's, in Antigone.
Well, okay, so some of this is a good, like, the image that I ended up with both of my classes was this horrible circularity of our knowledge. Um, if we think if we've liked the culture, we're gonna say that it did the things the way we would do it, and then we ignore the evidence that's out there that proves that they did the things that we think are abominable. And yet the problem of, like, whether we think it's abominable means that we actually have a particular morality that says these things are abominable. And then you end up in the vast circularity of, well, of course we know it's wrong to be, racist or sexist or murderous of infants because everybody agrees that. And it's like, wait a minute, that it's another layer of a shared narrative that
Mhm.
premises the proof. So
Okay.
if we think the Greeks are good guys, we're going to tell ourselves stories that they didn't
Oh,
do
they
it.
weren't all good. They
Yeah.
weren't all good. I'm just thinking, I don't think there was any archaeological evidence that they had done that, but I think there was in what was Phoenicia.
It depends on whether you think Crete's part of Greece, because
I do.
the Minotaur and the labyrinth, the reason that Theseus is there to go kill the Minotaur is because he's sent as one of the sacrifices.
Hmm. Oh, that kind of reminds me of Western European fairy stories where they sacrifice a virgin to a dragon.
Well, that's Andromeda, right? Perseus has to rescue her because
Right.
she's being sacrificed to the dragon,
Hmm.
to the sea monster, to save them. So I mean, so this, I mean, Rene Girard would say there's sacrifice at the background of all of these stories, and the only one that isn't, the only one that breaks the cycle is Christ.
Hmm.
So that, for example, the Roman founding story has the murder of Romulus at the root of it.
Hmm.
Um, the amphitheater games are sacrifices.
They were killings. They were sport killings, but not sure. Were there religious ceremonies involved in it? And in the actual killing?
It is a religious ceremony. That's the thing. They're like religious offerings. So there is
Oh, I didn't know that.
well, see how this, I mean, this is what's fascinating about how
That is fascinating.
right, okay, blame Gibbon, I think, to a certain extent. When we were reading Gibbon in my study in medieval history, and the chapter we read was where he's imagining Rome, which I think I got a little flustered on when I was
Mm.
trying to explain it all to them because, like, I was there and I want to tell you all about it. My tourist, this summer, that he does, or you can see it online constantly. It's like, well, we need to get back to the real, true classical, just and true tradition. And it's like you've just imagined through a Christian lens how dignified and noble these savages, these pagans were, but it's the Christianized version of how great the Romans were. It's not what they were actually doing, which was those games were offerings to the gods. Like, they're one big giant human sacrifice, the
Mhm.
gladiatorial games. They're not I mean, they become spectacle, and Augustine talks about them as spectacle, ironically after they're Christianized, in the sense that, well, anyway, they're not
Mhm.
that they were sacrifices. And it's interesting. It's like, does it count as sacrifice if it's not a virgin on the altar with the guy in the hood with the knife over her, right?
It's like a Hammer film.
Right. Which
Image.
human sacrifices are real human sacrifices, as opposed to we're going to have, our captives, killed by wild beasts in, Thanksgiving for our victory. That's a human
Yeah.
sacrifice.
Yeah, that would be a human sacrifice.
That's what the Romans were doing.
That would be like a libation. No, I have not studied ancient Rome enough to be able to say that, so I will take your word for it. I've just never read that before, that they actually consecrated the killings themselves. But yeah, that's kind of pedantic though, if when you look at it and say, well, we're just consecrating the games, but the games involve, every time. So yeah, it's a libation of blood.
I've seen a movie recently where they did do this quite accurately, and now I can't remember which one it was. Maybe the one with Nero, with Ustinov as Nero. Um, and but
The
anyway,
robe,
the
was
scene.
it maybe? Or
What?
Peter Ustinov, was he in The Robe? I think very
Oh,
old
maybe I
movie
wrote it
about
was The
Rome.
Robe, but I'm now not remember which movie it is. But the at the games they do a prayer and they offer the games to, and that's a
Oh,
totally
okay.
accurate, right? That they offer the
Yeah.
games to the gods, and they're like triumphant offerings of their
Hmm.
victory. So no, the Romans. I mean, this is what's funny is the Romans were actually incredibly religious.
Yes, that I didn't know.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're very, very serious about their pagan worship. And they're very serious about their service to the gods and particularly this kind of
Excuse me.
sacrifice. Daydreamer saying, my grade school teacher pronounced Hermione Hermoine.
Oh,
Hermoine. Hermoine. Okay.
that's off topic, but Hermione's one of my favorite names and was way before Rowling put it in her books. I just liked the sound of it.
I think it's Shakespeare, yeah? Isn't it it's in
Is it? I just remember the actress Hermione Gingold.
okay, this is to lighten the tone a little bit. Anyway,
Yeah.
they have human sacrifice.
Back to human sacrifice.
So it's a little rich claiming that the Romans, who are actually wanting to basically control the shipping in the Mediterranean and need to destroy their hated rivals for control of shipping in the Mediterranean, the Carthaginians, are somehow remembered now as the good guys for destroying the people doing human sacrifices when they were too.
That is interesting. How much? Well, I wonder how I could see what you mean when you say it must have been nothing more than propaganda. But then why did the propaganda work if the Romans were engaging in it publicly, very publicly,
They
in
were
their
engaging
games?
it. They were doing it with Christians, throwing them to
Right.
the lions.
So why would that have been horrifying? We have to stop them because they're committing human sacrifices when they were doing it themselves. How did it work?
Well, I don't know. I mean, this is what's funny is that we're horrified by it. I was just so I'm working on my Francis as Herald paper right now, and I was just looking at one of the manuscripts that has an image of the harrowing of hell, and it's between Psalm 105 and 106. And in Psalm 105, it's quite topical. Just a second. I need my scripture because I unfortunately don't have it all in my memory as I should. I remember where to look in the book rather than. Okay, so here this is what in Psalm 105 it's the rubric or the title for it's not in red in my book. So the title for this one is a confession of the manifold sins and ingratitudes of the Israelites. It includes, of course, they provoked Moses in the camp, Aaron, the Holy One of the Lord. The earth opened and swallowed up Dathan and covered the congregation of Abiram. And a fire was kindled in their congregation. The flame burned the wicked. They made also a calf in Horeb, and they adored the graven thing. And they changed their glory into the likeness of a calf that eateth grass. Okay, so that's one of the abominations. Here's another. They were mingled among the heathens and learned their works and served their idols, and it became a stumbling block to them. And they sacrificed their sons and their daughters to devils. And they shed innocent blood, the blood of their sons and of their daughters, which they sacrificed to the idols of Canaan. And the land was polluted with blood and was defiled with their works, and they went aside after their own inventions. And the Lord was exceedingly angry with his people, and he abhorred his inheritance. I mean, Christians get that, pick that up from the Psalms and understand that God does not want these human sacrifices. And now I'm at the edge of my ability to riff. Exactly how I think it's got to come from Christianity because the Romans the Romans practice the infant not infant sacrifice, right, but abandonment.
Right. Exposure. Right.
Exposure if the child isn't accepted into the family. So it's not like this is it's not like the Romans were particularly like nice to infants. They throw them in the
No,
sewer
no,
if
no.
they
I
don't
was,
acknowledge
yeah,
them, and the Christians are the ones rescuing them from the trash heaps, famously.
yeah, yeah. It's just and we mentioned this last time we spoke about the Dream of Scipio.
Hmm.
Um, was how do we know the Carthaginians were, committing sacrifice and the Romans might have just made it up? So my question is, well, why would they have to make it up if they're doing it themselves? Why would it even be an issue?
Now I'm curious, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that you mentioned they have archaeologically found um, evidence that looks like sacrifices in Carthage. So
Hmm.
that's appropriate. But what I haven't gone into, and now I'm feeling, oh, I really should have, um, is exactly what the arguments that the Romans made about destroying Carthage. I mean, the way I learned it in Latin class, and therefore, Carthago delinda est as a
Right.
we know that from the Cato, is because they were embarrassed by Hannibal's defeating them.
Exactly. Yeah, that was it. It was pride. Now, Roman pride, I mean, that's,
Hannibal rode his elephants over into Italy and
yeah,
ran around Italy for a while, and they really didn't like that.
no, Roman pride is redundant. It is to this day, from what I've heard.
I,
So, apologies to any Romans out there who aren't prideful.
hey, they're officially celebrating Saint Francis, the feast of Saint Francis tomorrow in Italy.
Yes,
So good
I saw
Romans,
that. It's
right?
it's a national
It's a
holiday
national
again.
holiday again. So
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
they're Christian. They learned the error of their ways back in antiquity.
I,
And
I hope. I hope.
okay, well, anyway, so one of the meta
What's next?
level evidence of this is we are constantly being drawn into shared narratives of good guys and bad guys. Like we are not the Carthaginian story, we are the Roman story, and so the Romans are the good guys of these narratives. So I read, I read enough of the Aeneid. I really feel like it would have come up in the bit when Aeneas abandons Dido, right? He goes and she's the
I've,
queen of
I've
Carthage, and she's this.
I've caused a problem for her. I've given her one more book to reread. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Well, I have read enough of the Aeneid to know that I don't. Maybe they mention the baby sacrifices in the Aeneid, but the Aeneid, the great narrative of the founding of Rome, which Virgil writes so that Augustus has his big epic to counter Homer, right? And here
Oh my
the
goodness. They did the
Aeneas.
same thing in the 19th century. Sorry.
See, see, we want to be
It's the
part.
same story.
We want to be part of this this cool narrative, and so we're going to write our version that shows that we came from Troy, right? And
Yeah.
that's what. Oh, you're going to love this, right? The layers of shared narrative here. That so you have the Greek story of the Iliad, which is the Greeks versus Troy, which was the great city,
Mhm.
which the Greeks get to tell the story about how they beat them. And then everybody for the rest of history wants to be Trojan, basically.
Yeah.
And the story of the Aeneid is Virgil's version of how the Romans are actually Trojan, right? Because
Mhm.
Aeneas flees with the gods carrying his father on his back. They carry the little statues of their family with Anchises, right? So he takes the gods and his father and he carries them to Rome by way of Carthage, where he has a mad passionate in the cave with Dido and then leaves her because he has a destiny to go found Rome, and then she kills herself.
That's dark.
Well, that's the part you remember if you read the Aeneid in school.
I did read the Aeneid and I don't remember that part. It's
Oh,
been
maybe
too
they didn't
long.
assign that
Sorry.
bit to you where she's weeping and then
No, I read
kills
the whole
herself.
book.
Okay, so she stabs
Yeah.
herself. It's a pre
Silly
Romeo and
woman.
Juliet sort of thing, right?
No man is worth it. Come on, Dido.
Well, Dido kills herself. He doesn't say, "I can't stay with you. Your people are horrible." So, and this is only, I mean, Virgil's only writing this like a generation or so after Cato,
Hmm.
maybe 2 generations. Anyway, and then this story gets so cool that in the 12th century in England, when the Normans need to prove that they're the cool guys, and wait, no, the British need to, okay, the Normans have invaded England with their own story, And Geoffrey Monmouth has to write how the cool British story is even better. So he makes the British come from Troy too, right?
Yeah.
Brutus, just like Aeneas, runs away from Troy and makes it to Albion. And, then we had the kings of the British for, millennium or so. Ending with, of course, Arthur, who then conquers everything, including maybe North America too. So, we're Arthurians as well.
Wait a minute. He was literally.
I did a blog post about riffing off on this. It's like maybe that ship that we see in the 1893 exposition of the Viking ship that makes it to Chicago is actually real, and that the reason that we have a 14th century style tower on the University of Chicago campus copied after the tower in Oxford at Magdalen College, which is where C.S. Lewis was, that the tower is the same because in fact it's already, the lost empire of Arthur, which, is Trojan. So there you go. Maybe it's all the same story, but it should have, it in that sense, we're all Carthaginian. Okay.
Maybe it was a portal.
It's a portal.
The Chicago World's Fair. They didn't tear the buildings down. They were the original buildings.
But you see, okay, so this is a great demonstration how intriguing and desirable it is to be in that same story, right? It's like what you said at the outset, and I pushed back on it. It's like all the stories are the same. This is a different version of. This is not that same thing. This is, in fact, we all desperately want there to be all of this same story. And so we're going to link ourselves to it no matter what.
Only the cool ones, right?
Well, it's interesting which ones people think are the cool ones.
Well, the winners. Nobody wants to be the loser. There is no, okay, let me put it to you this way. There is no big epic miniseries called Carthage.
Yet.
Nobody wants to see that ending. Everybody already knows it. It's spoiled.
Tragic. It's the tragedy of Carthage. Apparently, they all want to be Vikings, and the Vikings were conquered by Christ. So get over it. No, it's interesting because the way people tell it as we won, but we didn't necessarily. The Confederacy seems to never give up, right?
No, there's too many Northerners in the South now, so it's
damn Yankees.
No,
I do not. The truth about history is not that the winners write it. The truth about it is that the writers write it, and if you can write a better story, your side wins, even if in reality you lost.
Everybody writes, but the winners are actually the publishers. Right.
Yes, the winners are the ones that make it public, right? That make it.
Yeah.
The winners are the ones that convince everybody else that it's their story. So these are story wars for sure, but it's not the winners write history. It's the history that people accept is what went. No, see, it's tautological. Probably it's circular. I've got the circle online right on the screen.
Yes.
Right now.
The theme tonight is circular.
The circularity of things. Well,
what goes around comes around.
Well, the problem is we're losing listeners. We need to get to the substance. Okay. In the dream, Scipio is being addressed by his adoptive grandfather, and he's about to go conquer Carthage and destroy it. And his grandfather is telling him about his life, and it's coming after destroying Carthage. You'll have this career, and but at this point where I'm telling you this story in the dream, I see the course of your life wavering between two destinies, as it were, and you need to pay attention. Is the point of the dream. So hear the rest of the dream, right? I actually want to read through the next 3 chapters of this. It's like 3 pages. Chapter 3, 4, and 5. Okay. We're talking about 3, 4, and 5. Noticing both noticing the theology in the claims, and the sort of the theology and the cosmology I think primarily. And opening with my original problem saying Christians now keep thinking that they can make certain kinds of proofs because of certain philosophical arguments. And because we'd been reading the Dream of Scipio, I'm going, wait a minute. I'm not sure those are Christian. Let's find out. Okay, so like whose story is this in the thing? Okay. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm going to read a little bit and we're going to talk about it and we'll keep going like that. We're doing a running commentary, just like the text. But that you may be more zealous in safeguarding the Commonwealth, Scipio, be persuaded of this. So this is grandfather talking to grandson, trying to encourage him to go conquer Carthage. All those who have saved, aided, or enlarged the Commonwealth have a definite place, marked off in the heavens, where they may enjoy a blessed existence forever. Oh dear. Remember what I said Augustine told Deo Gratias to get their attention with?
Yeah.
Don't you want a better afterlife? Whoops. We might start with like trauma of losing Eden or something like that. That's not really where Augustine started. Anyway, he's in Carthage, right? He's Carthaginian. Basically, Augustine's Carthaginian. Oh, wait. If we're all Christian, we're all Augustinian. We're all Carthaginian. Carthage won. I had not thought of that. Done. We're done. Right? No, think about it. So Augustine is actually, he comes from, he's Bishop of Hippo, but he's from Carthage. Augustine is the greatest teacher of the Western Church. Augustine's theological vision trumps everything. It carries on into the catechizing of the North because of not this text, but the one I was teaching in class this week. It carries on into the catechizing of the New World because of the way the Spanish use it, because Augustine's so great. Carthage won. We just proved it. We are all Carthaginian now. Are their minds boggling yet?
Mind's boggled.
John Abrisi better be listening. I just proved we're all Carthaginian. Take that, Rome. Carthago delinda est. Guess what? Okay. So the first claim is all those who have saved or aided or enlarged the Commonwealth have a place marked off in the heavens where they may enjoy a blessed existence forever. There's an afterlife and it's blessed and you get to go there if you've done good stuff. Nothing that occurs on earth, indeed, is more gratifying to that supreme God. Oh gosh. Who rules the whole universe. Claim. I mean, you can say, why were the Romans willing to convert? Guess what? They already believed in God. And this is the game that Paul was playing with the Athenians about the unknown God, right? Remember that they're all going to be reading Macrobius's commentary on Scipio, and we know Macrobius is pagan, probably, but that this becomes the handbook throughout the Middle Ages for their cosmology, as in the pictures that I'm showing right now. So there's already philosophically, because Cicero's a philosopher, right? There's already philosophically the idea of the supreme God ruling the whole universe. Nothing that occurs on earth, indeed, is more gratifying to that supreme God who rules the whole universe than the establishment of associations and federations of men bound together by principles of justice, which are called commonwealths. It's the point of the book, because this is in Cicero's book on the Republic, right, on commonwealths. So God likes good government.
That the God of bureaucracy. Okay.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, how many trads have you heard, wanting us to go back to, if only we had Christian government.
Yes. If only we had Christian government, but they never say which Christian denomination. Well, or it's not mine.
Right. But they're speaking in Rome at that point, right? They're justice, commonwealth. I mean, I do know. I mean, it's like all these things I know I need to read more about, but I'm just gonna excite you guys, and you guys can help me with this and tell me in the comments. We actually have to have John Brissy on soon. So, well, I have commitments through November about a lot of layers of things, but we do have a guest next week, so you guys got to come next week. Too much of what we think we're claiming as traditional Catholics is actually philosophy. And it's not just Aristotelian philosophy, it's this deep embedded Roman philosophy that they're getting from, oh, right, the Carthaginians and the Phoenicians and probably the, the Greeks. And it's like the ancient world is full of this stuff. It's full of philosophy, which is already having a vision of a created reality or ruling. This is, to be fair, this is a ruling God, not a creating God, but he's ruling government. Government is ruled justly by this God.
Right. All of these cultures around the Mediterranean traded in ideas as well as goods.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think that's our answer about the Carthaginian stuff. I'm not sure they were that different from the Romans. I just I just don't buy it. I think there's something else going on in their rivalry, which has to do with control of the shipping. The governors and protectors of these proceed from here and return hither after death. So it's not general salvation. It's not even salvation, right? It's reward for your good service to the Commonwealth. And you get a place in the heavens.
You get a pension and you get a retirement.
Up in the stars, though, right? It's
like the stars in the gated community. That is the stars where all of the other good rulers go.
Mm-hmm. At this point, though, I was greatly dismayed, not at the fear of dying, but rather at the thought of being betrayed by relatives. This is Scipio commenting, right? I nevertheless asked whether he and my father, Aemilius Paulus, and the others whom we think of as dead were really still living. Of course these men are alive. Ooh, life after death, right? Of course these men are alive, he said, who have flown from the bonds of their bodies as from a prison. Difference.
Yes, big difference.
Indeed, that life of yours, as it is called, is really death. Just look up and see your father Paulus approaching you.
Oh, it's such Manichaeanism. Yeah, the body is nothing. Yeah, the spirit is everything.
Well, remember what Augustine got really super attracted by before he converted to, Christianity, which was this is not. I think this is earlier than Manichaeism. This is Cicero. Oh, yes. Cicero is simply being philosophical. But it had some legs.
It lasted.
Right.
The idea. Yeah. Right.
But this sense of our bodies are prisons, and if you live well, you escape the prison body, and get to continue to exist. Oh my gosh, who does that now? Right. All our tech bros who want to upload themselves to the clouds. Well, guess what? Very Ciceronian of you. When I saw him, I wept profusely, but he embraced and kissed me and forbade me to weep. As soon as I could check my tears and speak out, I said, I pray you, most revered and best of fathers, since this is truly life, as I hear Africanus tell, why do I linger on earth? Why do I not hasten hither to you? Why do I have to stick around and still be alive in this crummy body? Why can't I be in the stars already? You are mistaken, he replied, for until that God who rules all the region of the sky at which you are now looking has freed you from the fetters of your body, you cannot gain admission here. Technically, therefore, don't kill yourself.
Right.
Men were created with the understanding that they were to look after that sphere called Earth, which you see in the middle of the temple. Okay, now this to me is fascinating because it means you made the entirety of the world a temple.
Yes.
That you are meant to, serve while you're alive. Until we were rereading this, none of this had really hit me as hard as it is. It's like, wait a minute, I thought all of these ideas came out of the scriptures, which, of course, they're in conversation in the Mediterranean, definitely. Cicero's writing before Christ, so this cannot be a Christian image. This is, you are set here to serve in the temple of minds have been given to them out of the eternal fires you call fixed stars and planets. Okay, so your minds come from the stars. These spherical solids, which quickened with divine minds, journey through their circuits and orbits with amazing speed. Now, all of this, because of Macrobius's commentary, and because it's going to be out there throughout the Middle Ages as, I mean, it's behind what Dante does, definitely, right? Putting all his souls in the spheres, and you
Mhm.
ascend up through the spheres in contemplation to get to the God, to the divinity.
Mhm.
I'm really bothered by this. I mean,
Why are you bothered by it?
okay, why aren't you bothered by it?
I'm not bothered by it
Okay.
because um, God made everybody. Some of us were lucky enough to be born Christians, others weren't. And throughout time, everybody had an understanding, whether or not they could articulate this, that God exists and that He made everything. Occasionally, they're going to get some things right.
Yeah, so this is where this is good. This is where we started with the, like, why is the story true? Why do we know the story is true? And that was the same, you made the same argument then, right? It's like, because it's
Mhm.
out there. It's going to be out there, and therefore we're going to come up with pieces of it.
Yes,
Yes.
like the God without a name. They
Right.
understood God existed. They didn't know who He was, which is the most honest part of their religion.
And this, I mean, as I just said, this is the way Bartolome de las Casas argues in defense of the Indians. Fundamentally, saying they are civilized. Yes, they do human sacrifice, but that's like as far as they could get without the revelation. But that
Mm.
shows that they're like participating in humanity, because they have government, and they have, you know, architecture and cities and trade, and they have all of these things that you can get except for Christ.
Right. They were doing what the Romans did. They were creating order out of out of nature. They were creating their natural ordered societies because they understood that order existed and they tried to copy it as best they could.
Okay, so here, you know, begging the question in that sense is, then why do we need Christ? Like, you could, if you were in my class, my Eurociv class with some of my students, and or this happens like in regular, it's like, I'm Christian, I wear my cross on campus.
Mhm.
I'm no false advertising, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I will let you know what position I'm coming from. So, you know, but when I'm in
Mhm.
class, I'm not making that argument. I'm showing them what that argument looks like. And there's always some of them that are going to bristle and say, well, then why does it need to be your version of the truth? Like, how, you know, if what you just said, Casey, is that, you know, all human beings are already civilized at a
I'm saying
certain,
they recognize God, not necessarily that they're civilized in the sense of the word that we use it in civilization, like as in a complex society. But
well, that
it
was
was
what
it
De
had a
Las Casas
complexity.
was saying, that it was that the Indians had just as great. I mean, they're also, the Europeans love using other people's as
Yeah,
whipping boy, like ways to whip themselves about how bad they are.
they had recognizable order.
Right.
Their society were recognizably ordered the same way. Um, Japanese society was recognizably ordered, very similar. Some people thought to some English society
Right.
in the feudal age. I witnessed a fantastic argument between two historians on stage once when I was in college uh, about that very topic. And one of them, this British lady, was very insistent that you not call it feudal. That was a trigger word for her for some reason. I can't remember why, but one of my professors was saying no, they were just like a feudal society, and I didn't really see her point. They were ordered in a
Well, I
very
taught a
similar
course where
fashion.
we did that comparison, and yes, you're right. They were right.
Yeah.
There's
Yes.
warlords with retainers who, you know,
Hmm. My professor was right.
who
So there you go.
govern, you know, territories in that
Yeah.
structure. And
Hmm.
okay, so, but this, I mean, this does tend to, uh, it makes the question of, well, like, wait a minute, if, okay, so one that I had this argument in the, or discussion in the dog park today with one of my friends about, like, what do we want now in the United States? Cash Patel can be giving out like absolutely hideous challenge coins.
Oh, that was
The
why,
Punisher.
dude?
Oh my gosh, they
Why?
so overdid
Why?
that. Oh, why?
You
Just
really
think a coin
did.
that would have been so much cooler. Um, but the people are in support of the arrests that they're making of the people that have broken our laws.
Yes.
And
And Kash Patel and Harmeet Dillon, who is a Sikh,
right,
and Kash Patel is a Hindu.
right,
God bless both of them. They are going after the people that were attacking Christian groups, including Catholics, just for existing. Meaning the FBI had actually infiltrated. They showed up and spied on a bunch of traditional Catholics,
right.
and I guess the people in the FBI who had participated in this are gone, uh, because this was a tip they got from the ADL, who is now gone as of yesterday, and the SPLC is gone as of today. So these are two, and Harmeet Dillon's on her way to Portland, I think, right now.
Mm,
Anyway, these two people are doing everything they can to uphold the laws that were meant to protect everybody's freedom of association and religion and in good order and good government. So you ask, what do people want today? Uh,
well, you'd
well,
say
they,
law and
they want
order. They
order.
want order,
They want
and
order.
the laws is designed to support that order, that social order, which
Mm-hmm.
appropriate, you could say appropriately in the Roman legal tradition, which the United States, our legal tradition is, it's curious like how many layers you have to go through to get back to the Roman tradition for our legal system. It needs to go through church law, interestingly,
Yeah, the way I learned it
rather than
was that,
directly to the Justinianic Code, which is where like France
right,
went, right? Yeah.
that our criminal code comes from the Romans, and our civil code comes from British common law.
Right.
I might have that backwards.
No, no, but the
First two.
British common law is not Justinianic in the way that the continental law codes are. It
Mhm.
arises out of these more local traditions
Mm.
that are then organized by the Normans when they come in. That's a whole there's a whole historiography on that. It's very interesting of like the degree to which the Normans do or don't carry on over with the Anglo-Saxon institutions. Um, but the general claim. So this is okay. So you realize this is massively complicating the question of whether there's such a thing, not just as Christian nationalism, but what would it be to have a Christian America if what you're mainly wanting is government according to these classical
Right.
Roman, not even Christian uh,
I think you were I
ideals.
think you were I think you were edging towards saying, what would you say to if somebody says, why does it have to be Christian?
Yep.
And I said, because it's real. And when you look at if you compare what people believe around the world and how similar they are, what you notice is that they are actually recognizing reality. They're recognizing little pieces of reality. And the difference between Christianity and the other religions, I'm sure somebody will pop in and correct me, because I am not an expert in comparative religion, but that Judaism and Christianity, which came because God ordained through Judaism, was a revealed religion. It wasn't something somebody made up. Their story is that God revealed himself to them. And that's how we know he is who he is.
Right, but that means that yes, I mean the thing is that that's exactly the way we talk about it, saying it's been revealed to us, and but the problem is you can't say and therefore we know it's true because that's
No, I can't say, and therefore I know it's true. I can say,
it's begging the
right,
question of the revelation. How do you know a revelation is true?
right, and just trying. And there's so many things I am not an expert at. Rhetoric and logic are things I am also not good at. But if I were
Nobody's
just
an
having a
expert. This is just Socratic method of
right,
realizing nobody's an expert in any of
see,
everything.
I'm not an expert at Socratic method either.
Oh
Anyway,
well, Platonism.
I would say I can't prove it because I have faith. Well, that sounds like a cop out. I know it sounds like a cop out. But I can't explain it any other way. I notice things people don't notice. I notice that other people are noticing things that I do, and they don't realize it. And I think using reason that I know what that is. The rest of it is a gift. and
Right, and
that's it.
that fits with what I said earlier about it's like if you want to be in this shared narrative of being in the boat of Christ. Once you're in it, everything makes sense. But before you get in it, it's hard to convince people to want to get in because we keep
Yes.
making these arguments saying, "Oh, well, it gives you this." Okay, so but I'm not even on the second page of this, right? According to
Yeah.
Cicero, pagan Cicero, talking to Scipio about, or fantasy version of what Scipio was shown by his grandfather.
Hmm.
There's already an afterlife for good statesmen, people who serve the Commonwealth, right? So if you're an upstanding citizen, th- there's an afterlife that will give you freedom from the body, and you'll see your family there. I mean, it's like the promises that you make about, oh, we want to be rewarded for good behavior. It's already there. It's already available, at least in
Hmm.
Cicero's version. I do know a little bit more about this in terms of the Romans. They do honor their ancestors, so this is kind of
Yes.
ancestor worship. Um, on the tombs of the pagan Romans, they'll talk about the dead as divine, right?
Hmm.
The divine manes, which are like spirits, and it's interestingly sort of polythetic to figure out exactly what this divinity is in relationship to the supreme ruling God divinity.
Right. I was just going to ask
Yeah.
that. What is the difference between them calling them divine and the capital THE divine?
Except for Cicero, they didn't go in for theology a lot. So you end up with arguing with the Greeks. and that's what's interesting about trying to understand the Roman religion, that they didn't describe it in the terms that then Christians get used to, the philosophical arguments around the Trinity.
Mm.
So a lot our language in Christianity for worrying about these questions comes from the Greek philosophers. The Romans
Mm.
didn't. I was on my very first dissertation committee I was ever on when I was a beginner professor. The um, topic was this problem, right? What is this divinity that the Romans think about? And there aren't texts for it to explain it in
Interesting.
the way that
Hmm.
the Christians come up with. The Christians end up, loving to argue theology, but I think it's mainly because they're philosophical. It's philosophy that
Hmm.
they're arguing, not this problem of divinity, because the problem of divinity isn't answerable in those terms.
Right. Right. You need poetry.
Oh, yes, very good. And story, and we clearly, I mean, we need story to get people. But
Yes.
the why does it need to be Christian? If well, also why does it need? Okay, so we've got government already. We've got life after death and divinity, and you get your place up there in the Milky Way, according to Cicero, and we seem to have, thanks to this I mean, Cicero, he likes Greek philosophy, so it's all sort of embedded in a Greek vision already. But um, we're going to have the minds come from the stars, and if we keep going, we'll see the planets, and you're in this sort of celestial meditation of the creation, all without Christ. I mean, what? Okay, it bothers me because I'm realizing a lot of things that I would think to claim are Christian weren't. Their philosophy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're from the ancient philosophers. I mean, I knew this already before about a lot of the monastic practices, the asceticism, and the sort of monastic rules of life and sayings collections like the Desert Fathers. That's all
Hmm.
straight out of um, the philosophical traditions. Not necessarily the sayings themselves, but the sort of holy man who lives ascetically, and you collect his sayings and they give you a pattern of life. That's all the philosophers. So the earliest monks are behaving in a way that's familiar to the society as another kind of claim.
Okay.
Eh. You're less
Where does your
bothered than I
anxiety
am.
come
This is
from?
interesting, right? I'm like, but
Well, I was just thinking, well, yeah, Christ came and spoke in parables. His public ministry was exactly 3 years, and the Romans killed him
Mm.
at the instigation of the Pharisees.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't need to bring philosophy. Philosophy already existed. He didn't need to talk in those terms. He could because he's God,
Mm.
but he didn't need to do that. He needed to bring something else, which was, I think he needed to bring hope. Jerusalem was about to be destroyed in 60 years. Or is it 60 years? 30 years. 30 years.
30.
Yeah.
He dies in 33.
Yeah, right. So
The
27
temple,
years.
7 and 70. So
70.
37.
Right. I was thinking 60. Yeah.
Wait, no, we can't do math. What are we talking about?
Well, you already knew I couldn't do math and for philosophy or, just kidding.
Love. This is,
Yeah,
that's
what
what
they needed.
Chesterton said.
That's what they needed. That they needed hope. They needed love. They needed
Faith,
to know
hope,
they
and
were
love.
loved.
Guess what?
Yeah.
We've done it. We've proven Christianity. Well, she did. That's, I mean,
I don't
that,
think
have you read Chesterton's Orthodoxy? Or no, this is in
I did.
Heretics. Heretics. It's in Heretics.
No, I didn't read Heretics. I read Orthodoxy
That's
years ago.
exactly where he
Marcus
got
stuff.
to, because he says, in fact, if you were a philosopher, like particularly the Stoics, what the pagans were was very cold
Mm.
and hopeless, right? It's like, well, I mean, it's interesting with Cicero. He's like, is this hope or not, right? Because you get to go be in the stars, so that's one thing. But Chesterton's version of it was very much like what you just said, that Christianity brings something else that's not available to them in their bleakness. And that fits nicely with what we would say now, what people have now. It's like, what do you want? Right? You want to upload your consciousness into the cloud, and then what?
And then what?
Here it is.
Yeah,
Here it is. Here's your consciousness going into the cloud. I'll describe it. Wherefore, Scipio, you and all other dutiful men must keep your souls in the custody of your bodies, and must not leave this life of men except at the command of the one who gave it to you. So it is the sense that God gives you life. That you may not appear to have deserted the office assigned you. Very Roman, dutiful Roman stuff, right?
Right.
Or Ciceronian dutiful Roman stuff. But Scipio, cherish justice and your obligations to duty, as your grandfather here and I, your father, have done. This is important where parents and relatives are concerned, but it is of utmost importance in matters concerning the Commonwealth. And Commonwealth is translating republic. This is the same word, republic. This sort of life is your passport into the sky, to a union with those who have finished their lives on earth, and who, upon being released from their bodies, inhabit that place at which you are now looking. It was a circle of surpassing brilliance gleaming out amidst the blazing stars, that was parenthetical, which takes its name, the Milky Way, from the Greek word. So the souls of these dutiful not servants,
Yeah.
the dutiful Commonwealth officers all get to be in the Milky Way. As I looked out from this spot, everything appeared splendid and wonderful. Some stars were visible, which we never see from this region, which they make a lot of comment on, right? It's like if you go south,
Yeah.
And all were of a magnitude far greater than we had imagined. I'm always interested that they can figure out that the stars are big.
How do they know?
Yeah,
and it gets even more interesting as you read on, because I'm remembering the last time I read this a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. Of these, the smallest was the one furthest from the sky and nearest the earth, which shone forth with borrowed light. And indeed, the starry spheres easily surpass the earth in size. So they know it's bigger. From here,
How do they know?
I don't understand this. I've been reading about all this as cosmology.
It's really interesting,
and
isn't
testing.
it?
And, it's like so they understand things like eclipses with the moon and the sun.
They understand that how planets move differently than the stars move. So they made the distinction between the two. But
they also understand that the planets and stars are big. They don't think of them as points. From here, the earth appeared so small that I was ashamed of our empire, which is, so to speak, but a point on its surface, right? So humility of Rome, right? It's like, you may rule the world, but it's like a little speck.
Yeah.
So a good deal, this modern paganism as much as anything, feels like this sort of Ciceronian philosophy, right? We want, government and well, no, the witchcraft level or the human sacrifice level of stuff is a little different, but the kind of uh, chiseled white governmental mechanism.
Yes, civic nationalism, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah, it's that the state is everything, which sounds communist, but the Romans were very much into commerce, not communism. So it wouldn't be that.
They feed the city. The bread and
Well, they
circus.
don't want to revolt.
Right.
They do have to live there.
The bread and circus is just a dole.
But they don't feed every city. They just feed Rome, right?
True, but they feed Rome, right? And then Rome falls apart when the grain shipments stop. I mean, and they could do it because they have Egypt, because of the grain that comes out of Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
So they have it's a lot comes from North Africa too. Maybe that could be another reason they need Carthage, is they need the fields.
Except they salted it, the fields, so nothing would grow there anymore.
Except for Augustine lives there later, so I'm not sure that it died as much as they wished it would. It's still a city. That's where he's writing to Deo Gratias in Carthage. If they salted it so that it's sterile for the rest of eternity, it failed.
Well, they aren't growing crops there necessarily.
I know North Africa was one of the great it's the breadbasket of Rome. They send grain from North Africa to Rome.
Oh, interesting.
That's why they need control of North Africa. It's the fields. I know all of these things. It's like, the witch stories we have are true, and which ones are fantasies of more recent Gibbon, right? It's like Gibbon's version of why Rome fell, and it's apparently not so easy to say, as he said the Christians made it fall, but he's super scathing about superstition. The passage he has in the description of Rome in the 18th century about how decayed and fallen it is. It includes like all the great Baroque palaces of the papal nephews, right? He's saying, they corrupted the use of all of their art on superstition. I'm like, if you go to Rome now, those are the great, art collections.
Yeah.
Gibbon wasn't impressed.
Gibbon, I take it, was an Anglican.
Oh, yes. Very, very, very much not impressed by anything other than the Colosseum and wish.
So he was impressed by the pagan things, but not the things that were built by Christians later.
Right.
Because they were the wrong kind of Christian.
Right.
Which is what brings us back to why I don't think we want a Christian government specifically in our country.
In our country? Well,
it's as in prescribed. You won't get a good one that way.
Well, it's a little. I mean, Augustine's point will ultimately become, the two cities, right? There's the city of the world, which is power, and there's the city of God,
yes,
which is mixed in with the city of the world in this life, but will be separated out, right? And the fundamental claim, you can't know you can't know which is which. Augustine does read, the Gospels accurately, and when Jesus says you can't tell, right? They're going to be sorted at the judgment, but you can't tell now. Good point, right? It's like,
right.
Don't be thinking that you can do the sorting.
Right.
Augustine's also good because he's better at saying you can't do the purity spiral and heresy, because that's what the Donatists in Carthage are trying to do, and saying we are the ones that didn't give in when the persecutions were happening, and so we're the true Christians, and everybody else.
I think wasn't Augustine a part of that movement?
He wasn't a Donatist.
Before his
no, he was
conversion?
never. No, he wasn't a Donatist.
No.
Nope. He's very much against the Donatists. He's consistent
I can't hear you.
He's against the Donatists.
I can't hear you.
I haven't done anything.
Is it you?
I haven't done anything. I'm still talking. Your batteries on your do you have batteries in your headphones?
It's my headphones. I'm sorry. I'll fix them in a second here.
So John's saying religion and politics. The Catholic Church's self-definition is mother and teacher of nations. Well, I mean, we're building up this, so we got to get the shared narrative of everybody into the boat, right? And the problem hopefully, can you hear me now? The
Yeah, I'm just going to. Can you
what?
hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, I
I
can hear
my
you.
my headphones stopped working. Sorry. I don't know what's wrong with them. Sorry. Go on.
But you can hear me now?
Yes, I can hear
Okay.
you.
Um, that John, what we are actually trying to do, I know you want me to read Lonergan, and I've always felt like I'm doing it already, so I'm going to read Lonergan finally and just tell you that I've done it already. Um, Trying to unpack the reasons that people have difficulty seeing what we take for granted because we have faith, and that's always the huge challenge, because you have to figure out, as Augustine suggested to Deo Gratias, where people are coming from, figure out where they're starting from. And one of the things that he warns Deo Gratias about is like they may come with all of this philosophy in their heads. And so they're going to have different kinds of challenges for hearing the story of the gospel than they would if they, had other backgrounds or none, right? And the scientism of modernity is one that's more obvious, but there's all these embedded traditions that I think people don't notice as easily. And this one, it's like that it's come if you've been reading too much Cicero and you've been reading Macrobius, recognizing that some of these, the Romans already had some of these claims about souls and the afterlife. Or at least Cicero's making it out as if they do. You sure you can still hear me? Okay. Okay. So getting to the
Yeah.
spheres to give us a sense of what Scipio is seeing, right? So he's now ashamed of our empire because it looks so tiny. As I gazed rather intently at the earth, my grandfather said, "How long will your thoughts continue to dwell upon the earth? Do you not behold the regions to which you have come? The whole universe is comprised of 9 circles, or rather spheres. The outermost of these is the celestial sphere, embracing all the rest, itself the supreme God, confining and containing all the other spheres." So that makes divinity here is kind of a moving target, because he said there's the governing God, which seems to be, it's a little Aristotelian possibly, that there's the prime mover, but he's making the prime mover God, embracing all the rest, right?
Mhm.
In it are fixed the eternally revolving movements of the stars. Beneath it are the 7 underlying spheres, which revolve in an opposite direction to that of the celestial sphere. One of these spheres belongs to that planet which on Earth is called Saturn. Below it is that brilliant orb propitious and helpful to the human race called Jupiter. Next comes the ruddy one, which you call Mars, dreaded on Earth. Next, and occupying almost the middle region, comes the Sun, leader, chief, and regulator of the other lights, mind and moderator of the universe, and of such magnitude that it fills all with its radiance. The Sun's companions, so to speak, each in its own sphere, follow, the one Venus, the other Mercury, and in the lowest sphere the Moon, kindled by the rays of the Sun, revolves. Below the Moon all is mortal and transitory, with the exception of the souls bestowed upon the human race by the benevolence of the gods. Above the Moon all things are eternal. Now in the center, the 9th of the spheres, is the Earth, never moving and at bottom. Towards it all bodies gravitate by their own inclination. That being, just the ancient picture of the cosmos, and, for example, will then become the one that Dante uses when he's describing paradise.
Mhm.
So on the one hand, it's true, throughout the Middle Ages, it's philosophically very clear that the Earth is a sphere because it's surrounded by these spheres and everything falls to the center. And that's the Aristotelian explanation of why it's round, right? Or spherical,
Okay.
because all things fall to it. And for that to work, it needs to be round or spherical.
Mhm.
But otherwise, none of that is necessarily, it's the ancient vision. Lewis in the Narnia Chronicles uses it as his sort of atmospheric principle, so that the 7 books have the 7 atmospheres of the 7 planets. But none of that is necessarily Christian. And yet, Christians throughout the Middle Ages use it to organize their own thinking about creation.
Right. So they're using non-Christian sources to think about creation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's seems perfectly logical to me.
Well, I mean, so Augustine, which a commentary that I haven't read in depth and should probably more reading, he does a commentary on the Genesis. And one of the things that Galileo pulls out of that when he's making his argument about the Copernican description of this system, saying Augustine made it very clear that you shouldn't rely on the philosophers for your description of the reality of stuff, because if they change their minds, you'll look ridiculous.
Was he speaking of contemporaries of his?
Augustine?
Yeah. Or was he speaking of older philosophers?
I think he was just recognizing that you couldn't, you didn't want to hang the proof of Christianity on basically what we would call science, because
Right.
it's irrelevant. And Galileo,
Yes.
uses big chunks of quotations from Augustine to make exactly that point over and over again, that don't try to use your definition of nature and its structures as a way to test whether the scriptures are true, because the scriptures are accommodated to people's understanding, and basically if you change your understanding of reality, physical reality, then people will use the fact of you can't prove creation from scriptures in the ways that people unfortunately try to do now.
Yes. I guess most famously, some Englishmen tried to date the world to about to a certain number of years, the age of the earth, that is.
Bishop Usher. So one of my
Yeah.
students brought this up, and then I realized, because we were talking about Augustine tries to get the story back to Adam and Eve, and he said 4000 BC, and I corrected him, and I actually know that is the date that they used to give. I need to apologize to that student and say, wait, no, now I misunderstood what you were saying, because I thought he was doing the thing is, they do actually, the Christians love calculating things because they like the idea of time and entry into time, and so you can go back from Genesis and calculate on the basis of the lifespans.
Yeah, that's what they did.
That Genesis gives how long ago it was. So that's actually fine. That's like within the scriptures themselves as a calculation. But what Augustine specifically was saying is you don't want to use the scriptures can describe the physical reality accurately without it being tied to a particular structure of things. So, and Galileo was right. It's like you could do it either way. And he does this long proof about how when Joshua says to the sun to stand still in the midst of the heavens, that it's probably easier to do it if the sun's actually in the middle. So it just stops spinning, right? He says what it did was the sun used, rotates. And when Joshua said to the sun, stop spinning, it did. And that prolonged the day. And it's, it just sort of, it was, you can explain that both ways with either Copernican or the ancient Ptolemaic system, but it's not just Ptolemy, right? It's like this, right. So how much, like what proof does Christianity hang on, and which version of the story do we need everybody to be in order to be Christian?
What proof does Christianity hang on?
Yeah.
The proof of the existence of Christ, the proof that Christ is who he said he was, or that he rose from the dead, or all of the above.
Right. I mean, what's interesting for the missionaries into Anglo-Saxon England, they start with God created everything, right? That's an interesting claim, because we've got Cicero already talking about the creator God and the ruling God and the governing God. Medieval Christianity takes over a lot of this language, and it shows up now in traditional Catholic conversations as these are the things that are simply true. Stuff like natural law, right? Which is not in the scriptures in the way that people want to argue it is. It's a philosophical claim.
Right, and they could do that because these philosophies already existed. and
Right.
these
So they're
traditions
they're
already
starting
existed.
with what's out there and saying, look, our stuff fits.
Right.
So John is saying now, the sooner they make Newman a doctor of the church, the better. That should refocus things a good deal and make people revisit all of this.
That's this month.
Yeah, maybe. He gets the problem with the immaculate conception a little off. So
What did he get off about it?
well, so I was looking at his response to Reverend Poozy about Mary, and I ended up having to cut it from the paper that I got tangled up in it in, because it's like Newman is very English in his dismissal of a lot of the Marian devotions.
Really?
Yeah,
I find that very
I
surprising.
know.
Hmm.
Yeah, so but this parsing of like what's real Christianity versus what isn't real Christianity, this was my problem when I was listening to the Touchstone talks, and they weren't all Catholic, they were Orthodox. The Orthodox are very Greek, and the Greek is very philosophical. I mean, like
Mm-hmm.
deep philosophical problems that come out of the philosophy tradition, which, because Augustine wasn't versed in Greek or couldn't read it, we don't get as much in the Latin conversation. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but you know the numbers of ways that trying to get people into the boat have used the movement of saying, you already know this, look, it's like that, and then we
Mm-hmm.
drag into the boat all sorts of things that aren't necessary to the revelation, and then we get stuck because we are flipping the proof a lot, I think.
Hmm. It goes back to what I said. Jesus didn't need philosophy. It's he didn't. The people didn't need it.
Right. But a lot of modern Christians use the philosophical proofs as their debating points, and they want those philosophical proofs to be definitive. And that, I mean, it's the philosophy that's got, I mean, like, talk about, I had not thought of it this way. It's the philosophy that most of the debate bros are arguing over.
Yeah. I I I understand people like to argue philosophy. I don't understand how you can hang your religious belief on your ability to win a philosophical debate. That does sound cold, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
cold and rational,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not what Christ brought. He brought faith, hope, and love.
Right.
He didn't bring cold rationality.
And to be fair to Augustine, what he actually tells Deo Gratius is the way you need to teach this is with love.
Hmm. Of course.
It's all of the proofs, all of the rational gotchas, all of the definitions and structures, that's not going to get there, that's not going to convince them. And of course it's the Spirit who does the movement of bringing us into the story, but it's with love that Augustine tells the Carthaginian Gratius that he needs to tell the story.
Mhm.
Well, John is saying the epistemological stuff is his contribution. That, I think, is the basis of his elevation to doctor. He was a bit fluid on the papacy and its powers too. Well,
Yeah, it was new.
so our problem is the same one we started with, right? Although Casey, in the middle of our conversation, solved it all, right? The parables. Um, so John is saying the parables, but we now live in a compulsory education era. The teaching catechetical challenges are a bit different. Yes, but right? The problem that we're up against is we're battling stories, right? And the educational system wants us telling one story, and we want to be telling a different story. And this is where I'm on the front lines daily, right? It's like,
Mm.
in the educational context in which I am supposed to be operating as professor, I can't be doing the preaching version of the story. I have to be showing you the methodological problems of thinking historically. which include the claim of Christianity that God entered into the story. And there's a historical reality there, which we care about because we believe in the historical reality of it. But the proof, the sort of transformation is always out of reach because you can't do it with reason. It's rational once you have it, but you can't do it with reason.
Mm.
Which, if we, I think we need to study more philosophy to realize how much of it actually came out of that tradition, and then it's concordant with what we learn from Christ, but it isn't necessary to what we learn from Christ.
That's it right there. Yeah, it isn't necessary. And some people may think it's necessary because it's the only thing some people will respond to, right? They don't want to talk about um, something they can't explain. They want to be able to explain it. Now, St. Paul did say, always be ready to give a reason for the faith that is in you, but I don't think he had philosophical proof in mind when he said that.
He doesn't use philosophical proofs.
No.
Not in this way. Which is, of course, why, the definition of the Trinity isn't in the scriptures because
Right.
none of them are thinking in those terms when they're describing the engagement of Christ with them in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, we've come full circle now, and we're back where we started. That to understand what we're talking about, you need the shared narrative, which is
Yes.
it's like the conversion is finding yourself in that shared narrative, and then everybody has this common perspective on things. But the inside outside, it's so elusive to get to the point where you can say, yes, not only I think this is necessary. I think this story is necessary to your salvation. And I'm not sure I've gotten to the point where I can do what you just said, Paul, when you give a reason for that. Right? Because we do believe that. We say you need to be in the church. You need to be in the boat with Christ.
Well, say, yeah, give reason for the hope that is in you, and that's it right there. Because
Right.
I'm not going to drown.
I'm not going to drown.
I'm not going to be.
You need to be
be
on the ark
homeless
because you're
after
not
my
going to
death.
drown because we're here in the ark to help you
Yeah.
not drown. Well, that, I mean, we hope that you're not drowning. We hope that this is hopeful. How's that? We're more hopeful than everybody else out there on the internet. Whoo.
It's interesting. I think I've mentioned this once before, but my priest in my old parish back on the West Coast gave a great homily on All Souls Day, and it was he described the grave markers where they existed in Scandinavia pre-Christian, and they were almost like curses, like cursing the dead to keep away from them because they were terrified. They were terrified these people were going to come back and haunt them. And then after Christianity, the markings completely changed. They spoke about love and hope. Oh, I have hope that I'll see you again. And it's such a stark difference between just abject terror to see you when I get there. I love you. It was kind of neat. So yeah, the reason they gave for the hope that was in them was that because somebody gave it to me, and I have it. And I want to pass it on to other people.
Well, that's certainly our purpose, right? We want to share the hope we have and hopefully get to the point where you want to jump in the boat with us. But I think we are yes, I mean, this is what we're trying to write. This is what Draco Chemicus is about, and we're trying to get you to the point where you can feel that hope.
Yes.
But it's going to take a bit. But I'm hopeful now that we're on the right path. Right. So that's good.
Definitely are.
Okay, so bingo. You are at Lonergan's functional specialty level. But reason can help avoid the gaslighting of the other stories you refer to. Reason is an armor against false stories, not a proof for say. Right. Yes.
Yeah.
I think that might be what the point is. When we are working at the functional specialty level, we support true stories, revealed truth, not undermine it. That's a nice place to sort of pause for the moment in our continuing efforts to find the shared narrative.
Mm-hmm. It appears to be everywhere.
She's so hopeful. Okay, well, thank you all for sharing this with us. Thank you. We're going to drag John on camera at some point and get him to do this, not just in the chat. Next week, we have guest Robert Doby talking about his book on Tolkien and the recovery of fantasy. So maybe that's another path back into this recovery of the fairy story that we, in fact, know we are living in, and that gives us great hope and joy and confidence in God's love. And that is, of course, what Chesterton said. The Christians showed the pagans, who were all cold and rational and stoic about their purpose and existence. Yes. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week with more hope. Good night.